Hi guys, morning. It's impossible to find somewhere in the house that the sun is not like too much. So I decided on the baby room, the little room. Nobody lives in there anyhow. So morning, how you guys doing? I was a bit. Should I do the live on my personal page or should I go over by my business page to do it? But I decided that I'm going to do it on my personal page, which is kind of out of character for me, considering the subject that I will be covering. Um, I hope everyone is staying safe. Um, and as the title says, a lot of people are now looking for our lives. For most people, the lives have forever been changed by this pandemic. And this life has nothing to do with the pandemic, but most of us will have no jobs to go back to. A lot of small businesses will fail. I have seen two businesses that are of similar character as the one, hi Din Din, as the one I operate fails within the last week. And I am grateful that I live in Sweden at this moment where they realize where the majority of the population is employed by themselves, and our government was very early out to provide the foundation for small businesses like mine to survive. I am not without repercussions from the pandemic. It's just that it doesn't hit me as hard. It hits me in the way that my business was or is export dependent. Hi, Patricia. But I have seen a business that was going so well in the UK that is almost the exact copy of mine, and I've seen it gone under, and it makes me sad. It makes me really, really sad because a lot of lives will be destroyed. A lot of lives will be forever changed. I felt, yeah, and that is why also I so believe in the Swedish model that people are going to die, unfortunately. So you cannot have a double whammy of destroying the economy and people are still dying, because a long-term lockdown is not sustainable. It is not economically sustainable. It is not socially sustainable. And I see a lot of, hi, I'm Hope, how are you doing? I didn't come here to speak about the pandemic, so I'll just say it quickly. I see a lot of countries like Denmark opening up, and Denmark is, we're opening up back up because we want to save ourselves from a deep recession. I see Germany opening up, and they're saying the same thing. So, if you can support a small business, it doesn't have to be mine. If you can support a small business, then go out there and do it. A lot of our survival is dependent on you guys doing that. Again, I am eternally grateful that I have some of the best customers where I realized that a customer that would probably buy one soap each month, I realize that they've gone out and they've bought 3-4 different items, and for that I am eternally grateful. Especially when just before the virus hits, and I'll share a story with you. I have to censor it because I don't want to break the confidentiality clause I signed in my work. But I don't know how many of you saw the post that I shared of the young girl called Rachel in Holland. How what I'm understanding, she works in a care home or something similar to that. She works with people who need care services, and I'm assuming it's a care home because she has the relatives visiting the patients or the clients or whatever they're called, and each time two families would visit their relatives, she was told that she had to leave the room because they didn't like Black people. For those of you who were on my page in February, you guys saw that I wrote something that for the first time in my life, I was told that I couldn't do the work I'm doing because I was Black. And then it happens again, and I wrote it on Facebook and it became a whole thing. I was placed in a situation 3 weeks ago. I don't work in a care home, I work with hair. But I was placed in a situation 3 weeks ago where a parent, after 16 years working with kids, or the mentally ill or whatever it's called, prisoners, I was placed in a situation where I was told that because, and I'm going to say this in Patois, because somebody afraid of black puss and dog, them afraid of me. All my life in Sweden, I've always been the only Black in my class, except when I studied a couple of years ago, 2017, when I went to do that there were 3 other Black people in a class of 40. Everywhere I have worked in Sweden, I've always been the only Black. And that means something is wrong with Sweden. Anyhow, when I was told that my Blackness is making people sick, and them never mean it as anything racist according to them. Oh, you're good at what you do and you're a nice person, but the color of your skin and make people sick. I can't say it the way I want to say it because I have co-workers on this page, and the last time they were the ones who screenshot what I put up, thinking that I would back down. I didn't back down. And I actually begged them to fire me. They didn't. But because of confidentiality clause, I can't go into the discussion the way I want to go into it because I am here still deciding. I haven't been to work since because I am here deciding is it really worth it? Hi Daisha, is it really worth being compared to cats, having my complexion compared to cats and dogs? Is it really worth it? And I don't need anyone to tell me that I am good at what I do. This is the same workplace that tell me, say, my co-worker them have a problem with me because me make it clear I'm more educated than them. That is not my problem. Education is free in Sweden. And yeah, I am more educated than them. But so I have sat home for the last couple of weeks in my yard and contemplating that in 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, but I have bigger worries, the color of my skin is making somebody sick in a multicultural society. And I was being told that not because they had a problem with me as a person, but in Sweden in 2020, hey Olivia, in Sweden in 2020, after 16 years working in the same field, after doing everything I was told to do in Sweden as an immigrant, that my dark complexion was making people sick. My blackness was making people sick. I came to Sweden as a teenager. I am 41 years old. I came to Sweden when I was 19 years old. No, Patricia, it wasn't the people I worked with who said it. It was the mother of one of the child. It wasn't. And she is a university educated professional that said this. It is not. If it were the people I worked with, and I don't work with street side mental illness. I worked with clinical mental illness. And I said to myself, I have to make the decision. The day I will not be silent. The last time I said something about my complexion being a hindrance to me practicing my profession, one of my co-workers came on here and screenshot what I wrote, and it made a big thing in the city that I work. And they tried to get me to back down, and I would never back down, and I would never apologize because I wasn't lying and I didn't break any rules. But I have to now wonder, is it worth it being discriminated and being abused at work? And not anyone, I sat there and I listened to it, and no one, not one of the 14 people I work with said anything other than, that is not true. It is something else. But 2 months ago, when another parent made a reference to me, not my performance, because I am damn good at what I do. And I said it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with my complexion. The only thing that separates me from the people I work with is my complexion. It was almost as if they wanted to reprimand me. But I always tell people, maroon blood runs through my veins, and I would rather die for my truth. I would rather die, and nobody is going to, I don't suffer from inferiority complex. I don't think that because a person is Caucasian, I'm better than them. If they're better than me. If anything, I came to your country. I had to learn your language, and I made it. So you shouldn't even be in the same job as I am, because I had to come to your country and play by your rules. And everybody, the whole study in Sweden about racism tells us that a black person has a 75% chance of not getting a job in Sweden compared to everybody else. Because Sweden has become a country that I don't know. This is not the Sweden I immigrated to. This is not the country I loved so much. I spent a good 16 years living in the capital of Sweden, and I've never had one incident of racism. Not directly, maybe indirectly, but maybe behind me. The closest thing I had to racism and discrimination in Stockholm was based on ignorance. When I used to wear hair, and I would change my hair every other week, and they would be like, oh, your hair grew or your hair didn't grow. And they would actually come to try to look in the root of my hair. And for me, that was ignorance. Sweden was not, 15, 20 years ago, Sweden was not as multicultural as it is. Now, what they did say this time around was that, oh, it is not true. And I can't go into the details why it is not true, but they just said it's not true. But nobody thought that. And then I say to myself, I went back to this work. I run a business, and I could have taken all my time and focus. I could have taken all my time and focus on my business. But then I missed the job, so I keep going back. But then when I spent a week not sleeping, wondering, calculating the risk of speaking out about this, and when something affects you, I didn't get angry, I get sad. Usually I get angry for things like that. I got sad because I got sad that in 2020 Sweden, thanks Olivia, in 2020 Sweden, I am being told that my blackness is causing workplace disturbance. Last time when I spoke about it, I was told that my post on social media made my workmates uncomfortable because someone screenshot it because I don't have my manager on my social media. She doesn't have social media. Someone screenshot it and I called them a rat. Those who follow my page knew that I called them a rat. And when they asked me about it, I said the only person who would be affected and insulted is a rat, is the person who did it. And if they're uncomfortable with me being there, that is their problem. I make no apologies for who I am as a person. Yeah. And this time, and they followed my page. They didn't react to the fact that I said that I was being racially attacked. They reacted to the fact that I posted it on social media. And then because I live, and it's not where I live, I have no problem where I live. It is the neighboring city where I work. And because the neighboring city was going to be put into the spotlight, then they reacted, not because I felt racially discriminated, not because someone was constantly sending text messages harassing me at work, on the work phone, not because of that, but because I wrote about it. And they thought I was stupid. I worked for 5 years as a supervisor in Sweden, so I pretty much know most of the workplace related rules. And I also know that when you work for the government, you're allowed to criticize them without revealing sensitive information. And then when they couldn't get me on that, one of my former co-workers had written under the post that a person like you who is that educated and that competent in what you do, they should be happy to have you. They turned around and said that it was about prestige and status for me because my co-workers were uncomfortable that I wrote that I was more educated than them. That is a fact. Education is free in Sweden. Anyone who have a resident permit, meaning anyone that has legally lived here for 2 years or more, can access it completely free. So I've spent the last 3 weeks, as I said, I haven't gone to work. That's this last week. I'm free. 2 weeks ago, I spent a week not sleeping because I knew that whenever I spoke of this is when I'm going to have to say goodbye to a job I love very much. I knew that speaking of this is going to make me unemployable, but there's some risk, and I've always known, and that is why I even started the companies way back when I was told that I needed to have perfect Swedish in order to get a job, even though I came to Sweden with qualified for the jobs I was seeking. And when I was told that I needed to have perfect Swedish, you know what I did? I went out there and I created my own job. I started a dating company. And when I moved down to this rural part of Sweden from the capital, and that was the first time I ever applied for a job in Sweden that I have never had. And the reason I didn't have the job, I remember I applied to a behandlingshem, a treatment facility, being that I am a treatment therapist or whatever it's called. I applied to a treatment facility in a neighboring town. And if you know my middle name, it is pretty Swedish. And my surname, being my ex-husband's name, is pretty Danish. So when I applied for the job, I didn't use Shanafi. I used Julianne Dinesen. And they immediately sent me an email, oh, your CV looks really, really good. I'm talking about 5 years ago. Oh, your CV looks really, really good and blah, 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 blah. And then I went for the interview. And when I went for the interview, she came out and she looked several times in the reception area. And apparently she was looking for someone that looks Scandinavian. And finally she said for me, how are you, Julian? And I said, hi, Shanafi. And said, yeah, same person. This was 5 years ago, 2015, I think, 2016, somewhere there. And then the interview lasted 2 minutes. The only question I got was, Um, and by this time, I had worked 3 years in a special needs school, 2 years in a prison, and 10 years as a treatment family, basically taking care of families who, in my own home, who otherwise would have ended up in a institution. And this job was to work with refugee children who came unaccompanied to Sweden. And then by the time I got home, I got an email saying that they had chosen somebody else for the job. So as the rules are in Sweden, I am allowed to ask, why wasn't I chosen? And so I did. And I said, is it because I disappointed you? Was it that you were looking for another physical profile? Because based on where this job was and based on where I lived, I find it hard to believe that there was anyone more qualified for that particular job on experience and on paper than myself. 2 days later, they called again, and this time she was like, she and her colleague, she and her co-worker, they had looked over the application and they made a slight mistake. They thought it was somebody else that they were calling. And I said then to them that I wouldn't want to work in your place. But I'll keep it in mind if I ever get desperate for a job. And I went and I opened that supermarket and that hair shop. And I worked in the kindergarten, I think, for 2 years. And I saw it as, because I was outside, I never accepted it, but I saw it as moving from multicultural Stockholm to a rural village, then things would be a bit different. So, but to be compared to cats and dogs for my blackness, I mean, how do you compare this to the blackness of a cat and a dog? And then tell me, Shanav, it's not you, it is your skin color. I am my skin color. My skin color is everything I am. And I am not sure I'll ever be able to go back in that war. But you know, I chose not to quit in the classic sense because that would have them winning. That would have them winning. That would. But I'm also telling them, because I'm pretty sure somebody from my work is watching, that I cannot be intimidated and I cannot be bullied and I cannot be silent. I have had to climb a lot of hills in life. And if I can get over a childhood of being sexually molested, I can get over anything. But I don't live my life in black and white. My kids are biracial. I was married to a Swede, a Dane, or whatever it is, for 16 years. So I don't see people's color. But if you are going to start to see my color, and if your expectation and your stereotype of what a black immigrant in Sweden is capable of achieving, if I disturb that stereotype, then I'm sorry. If I, through my blackness, is having you going back to the drawing board and reassessing your own capabilities as a human being. Let me tell you something. I didn't become successful at what I do because of anything Sweden did for me. I came to Sweden at 19 years old. It therefore means that Jamaica laid, a black majority country, laid the foundation. Sweden, through its socio-economic system, gave me opportunities to manifest what I was capable of, that I could not afford in Jamaica. When I was married to my ex-husband, people used to say, "Oh, Shanafi, you don't understand because you are with one of them." And maybe I didn't understand. Maybe I did not understand. But guess what? I was also married to someone that when the marriage broke down, I came out stronger than I went in. Because usually when you're in a mixed relationship in Sweden, and you become successful, or you do not fall victim to the stereotype that, oh, you are unsocial, or you're this, or you have social problems, or you live on the fringes of society, they say, oh, it's not you, it's because you have married a Swede. It is because you have married a Swede. Because I think people believe that as black people, whether they manifest it in their actions or in their thoughts, or whatever, however way they manifest it, they seem to think that we are not capable of forming our own thoughts and planning and executing our own lives. Many years ago, I said something on another Facebook profile, because then I worked in the prison system and I had to have a more private profile. I said something that, and it is not true for most Swedes I meet, but I said something that Swedes and Scandinavians in general do not have a problem with a minority sitting at the same table they sat at. The problem they have is if you're eating the 5-course meal with them. They don't mind you being at the same table, but your role should be to clean the table after them. And that is why when I immigrated to Sweden as a 19-year-old, I made the conscious decision that I wasn't going to take a cleaning job. I wasn't going to take any job that was atypical for immigrants, because if I wasn't going to do that job in Jamaica, I wasn't going to go to anyone else's country and do it. And I never did. Nothing is wrong with that. But you see, and now as I speak, I know I am basically writing an X beside my ability to be employed. But I've always been told that I make a very bad employee. My personality does not go well with playing by the rules. I've had to do that personality test quite a few times. And that is why I made sure that I had an alternative source of income. And that is why, as I speak to you today, I am in the process of registering a business for my 9-year-old, because I do not want my children. I have a child that is completely black like me, and I have biracial children. And I don't want my children, a generation from now, having to fight the fight that people were fighting in 1960s USA, that black people are now fighting in Sweden. Because I don't know what else to do. I played by the rules. I did everything right. I did everything to the point where I am met with reverse racism, where people think that they're complimenting me by saying, "Oh, I cannot believe you did that." And then I would ask why, and they say, "You're not like the rest of them." Well, guess what? I am one of them. And it is this, and then they would make the excuse, "But you are married to a Swede." And that is why I made the conscious decision that even though my preference all my life have been for European men, I made the conscious decision that I was going to live in an all-black household, because I was not going to play into other people's stereotype and idea of what I am capable of. I am the author of my own book. And there's another Jamaican here. She has an MBA from Jönköping Business School. That's one of the top business schools in Sweden. She came to Sweden with a bachelor's from Jamaica in business administration. She earned the MBA here. And almost 6 years in Sweden, she is yet to be able to land a permanent job. And she will apply for a job, and then she applies for a cleaning job. And they call from the same employer. And they call her for the cleaning job, but not the job that requires her to sit around an office and chair. And in a lot of ways, it is our fault. Because we accept what they say to us. We accept that we must fight. We must play by their rules. I don't know if my former classmate, Olivia Jakobson, is on this still. I saw her. But if you were in the class when we were studying at university, where the professor said to us that and we were studying peace and development, yeah? And the professor said to us that in order to achieve peace, sometimes there must be war. You can take that literally, or you can take that figuratively. And then they tell you, "Oh, you're not," they try to silence you. "Oh, if you open your mouth, then you're going to appear to be aggressive. And then you are going to make what they say right about you." Well, guess what? We eat habanero pepper. Yeah, we do. It means that we are more expressive and we are more aggressive. Thank you very much, Olivia. It means that we're more expressive and we're more aggressive than you guys are. It means that because I come from a bloodline of people that have been having to fight for 400 years. We don't know how to sit and take things silently. We don't. Because I love a lot of things about Sweden. Sweden have done a lot for me. I am probably one of the most patriotic Swedes there are around. I have lived longer in Sweden than I have lived in Jamaica. And for all intended purposes, I live a very Swedish life. However, I will not accept. I have a voice, and when I speak, people listen. That is why over my other page, there are 145,000 who follow me. It means that when I speak, it makes an impact on other people's life. Maybe there are other Black people in Sweden that don't command that audience. And so it would be wrong of me. It would be almost hypocrisy for me to sit here and allow someone to compare me and allow someone to compare me to cats and dogs, not in terms of behavior, but in terms of the impact, the negative impact it has on another human being. And then be told that it is not racist, because Swedes feel the need to be politically correct. They are not racist. Yesterday, I watched one of these public servants, and I had to laugh when they were giving their daily briefing about the COVID-19 situation. And in a country where they tell immigrants that you have to have perfect Swedish in order to even get a anything above being a janitor, in order to go and change the diapers of old people, they tell you that you have to have perfect Swedish, when 50% of the time you have it is not the fact that you don't understand Swedish. Swedish words are complicated to pronounce. You have to be born in it to pronounce it. You have to literally be born in it, have been here before the age of 12 to speak perfect Swedish. And of course, they're and I watched one of the chief public servants in Sweden unable, in a live television broadcast, unable to translate what in English is general recommendation, allmänna råd. I watch in Swedish on live television in a country where you are told that the same country and the same institution that told the Swedish public that the reason Somalians were dying from the virus in the numbers they were dying was because they did not understand Swedish. And I watched one of the top officials in Sweden unable, not unwilling, unable to translate simple everyday sentences. And yes, the national language is Swedish, but globally, at maximum, it's 11 million people who speak Swedish. And not even that, because you probably have 2 million in Sweden who don't speak Swedish anyhow. The other one was vårdskada, which would be healthcare injuries or something like that. Basically meaning that you go to the hospital without good reason and then you get sick there. Yeah. And I sit and I say to myself, Shnafi, how long are you going to be silent? I see people every day complain about how they're treated. And I said, I don't live my life in black and white. I rarely comment on racial issues because I don't want to be branded as that angry black woman. Because when you speak out, that is what you are branded as in Sweden. Those angry Africans, that angry black woman. And even with saying this, as a Jamaican, as a non-African African of African descent, I have it a lot better than Africans. At least Jamaicans enjoy a position of privilege in the racial scale in Sweden, because most Jamaicans in Sweden live a good life. They work, they go to university, and they never get in trouble. You never even know they exist. We just hate each other, but nobody else hates us. So for my Swedish friends and for people in general, and especially for those of you who might have had your brush with racism, stop being silent. You don't have to go out there with sticks and stones. But I will never, I haven't applied a lot from studying to my work, to my life. But as my friend there reminded me, it was Ludwig, the professor, who said it. Sometimes, in order to achieve peace, war is necessary. Maybe not necessarily dropping bombs, but you are your biggest advocate. Nobody's going to go out there and advocate for you. So it is my responsibility to not keep silent when somebody compares me to cats and dogs. When somebody tells me that their child fear me and I make their child sick because their child is afraid of black cats and dogs, and my blackness is triggering their epileptic attacks, it is not my job to keep silent. Cost it what it may. I'm not trying to play a hero. But I have never been one to keep silent. I was always a black sheep of my family, because when my father was molesting me, I never kept silent. As a 12-year-old, I never kept silent. So I became the black sheep. I am used to having the world against me. I'm used to that. And I never got angry. I never ever retaliated. I tell my mind and I move on. But now it is me. But what about that other person who, because their next meal depends on them going into an institution where you are going to be told, or you're going to be likened to cats and dogs? What about that person? What if I was a weak person? What if I was not psychologically stable enough? I might have done like 1 in 4, but like 4 persons in Sweden and committed suicide. I might have fell into depression. Because what can I do about my complexion? What can I do about my skin color? What can I do about that? The same complexion, the same skin color that gives me a certain protection that it does not give a light-skinned person, a pale person. What am I supposed to do about my blackness? What am I supposed to do with my ability to take in and process information? What am I supposed to do? You know, the last time when they wanted me to quit, they went as far as telling me that me running a company is interfering with the way my ability to do my job. When I asked them, how do you mean it's interfering with my ability to do my job? As anyone ever complained, they couldn't answer. They wanted me to sign a paper to say that I don't have a second job. I said, look here, I don't have a second job. I own a company. And as a black person in Sweden, if you think that there's a problem with me owning a company, take me to court. Because you are not supposed to rise against printing out your bank statement every 2 weeks and giving to the social department in order for them to pay your rent. You're not supposed supposed to be able to make it on your own here. And I used to tell, there's another Jamaican girl here, that same one with the MBA. And she's kind of sarcastically laughing at me now. Because I used to tell her, all you have to do, sweetheart, is learn the language. Learn the language. Like most Jamaicans, you came here with a bachelor's degree. Learn the language. Just learn the language. Learn the language and everything will be okay. When they would offer her nothing but cleaning jobs, I said to her, go and do your MBA. And she did. And even with an MBA from Sweden, she can't find a job. She can't. You just said what I was going to say. When I was growing up with my grandmother instilled in me that I am not an ordinary person. And the trials and tribulations in life have taught me that. When I worked at the post office, that was my first job in Sweden, working at a postal terminal. And I saw how the Gambian guys who didn't speak Swedish were treated. They were given the hardest things at 2 o'clock in the winter and the night. They had to go out in the trailers and unpacked those trailers. And it were the same set of guys every single night. Segeltorp Terminal in, have a good one, pretty girl, in Stockholm. And I spoke out about it. I could barely speak Swedish. I was 8 months into Sweden. And I spoke out about it. And the manager challenged me. And I told her, I will have your job. 8 months later, I didn't have her job. But I got pretty close. And she was fired. At that same job, 2 years into being arbeidsleider, supervisor there, I was told by a manager, being a supervisor with your Swedish, because I had really bad Swedish. I could write Swedish because I came to Sweden on the 20th of August and I started university on the 21st. Contrary to what a lot of people think, I came here and I started university the day after. And when he said to me that this is a far way from Jamaica, isn't it? I quit. I will never forget. It was a friend of mine from Turkey, Jalal, that drove me home that night. I quit on the spot. It was $235. It cost him $100,000 because it was a form of discrimination. What he said, and in the context he said it, was discriminatory. This was 2006. So I've never been, but I didn't see it as racism. I just see him as disrespecting me at the time. And I said then to myself, but before all that happened, the post office in Sweden, when it was Swedish owned, used to pick out about 15 people a year that... Oh, okay, sweetheart. Birthday? The post office used to pick out 15 people a year that they thought would have been future leaders. Yeah? My first year working at that post office, I was chosen. 15 people throughout the country, throughout all of Sweden. My first year, I was chosen. They invested $500,000 in educating me. And I walked away from that because you had to do the personality test. And back then, in 2003, the personality test I had to do told me, or told them, that I would not make a good employee. And when I wanted to walk away, they said it was perfect. Perfect for me. Because they didn't want howls, they wanted wolves. Many years later, I applied 5 years in a row for a job at the jails, not prison, at the jails. In Sweden, when you want to work in the prisons or the jails, you have to be a citizen, and you have to do the personality test that the police, everybody else does. And you have to go to a course for, most people have a university education, but you still have to go to a course that is specifically that for that purpose. After the personality test, that you have to do the same one that pilots and everybody do, yeah, to show that you will not abuse your powers. After the personality test, they told me I wasn't fit to work in a jail. So they were going to send me to work at a long-term prison facility, a category 2 prison, meaning people were getting ready to get out into society, but they were part of the worst, murderers, that kind of stuff. Because my personality wouldn't do well. Oh, Diane, thanks. My personality wouldn't do well in a jail where the aim is just to lock somebody in and not allow them to grow or to change or not to work with them. And for many years, I saw it as being negative. I saw it as being negative when I'm told that I don't make a good employee. For over a decade, I sat and I thought about it. Why can't I be like everybody else? Why can't I keep silent like everybody else? Why must I take on fights that everybody else is walking away from or ignoring? And pretty much, I got the answer to that. I wasn't taking on any fight. I was chosen for this. And it would be a disappointment for my grandmother, who instilled in me that I was no ordinary person. My grandmother, who told me as a child that I could, my mouth, I go make me can't live in Jamaica. That was what my grandmother told me. And I can tell you why. I grew up in homophobic Jamaica when homophobia was at its height. And even as a 6-year-old and 7-year-old, the moment I understood what it was, I would sit at the standpipe and I would, because we had to go for our water, I would sit at the standpipe and I would say to people when they spoke about burning people and this and that and I would say, why? And they would run me, and because you're growing up, I would go home and I would complain to my grandmother, and my grandmother would say to me, you can't live in Jamaica, your mouth will kill you. Later on in life, attending Mobay High, I had an English teacher there, Mrs. Brown, Dr. Brown, that famous gynecologist in Montego Bay, his wife. She was my English teacher, and she was a mother to every poor pitney in Montego Bay High. Maybe because she had walked the walk, a lot of us had walked. And one day, Mrs. Brown said to me, she was my form teacher in the 4th form, and in the 5th form, And even though I went, and this is, even though I went to Montego Bay High School, I transferred to Montego Bay High School with an average of 84.7. I will never forget. I was placed in the lowest stream class with an average of 84.7. I was placed in the lowest streamed class. But then again, I couldn't say much because the higher streamed class at Montego Bay High School was reserved for the Indian immigrants, the mixed race kids, and the black kids who their parents were overclassed. But you know what? I did leave Montego Bay High with 8 subjects. And yeah, it became first in the class every exam because I didn't belong in that class. But it taught me a lot of things. I was in the class with the highest percentage of ordinary Jamaican kids. And it taught me a lot. But anyhow, back to Mrs. Brown. Mrs. Brown once said to me, as we were transitioning from 4th form to 5th form, and she said to me, everyone thought I was going to grow up to be a lawyer because that is how much I love to chat. I am very shy, but once I got going, make it stop. And Mrs. Brown once said to me, Shanafi, what are you going to do? People will tell her that I was among her favorite students. I don't know. And Mrs. Brown even said it to me, you cannot live in Jamaica. Your mouth, Jamaica is not ready for a mouth like yours. And she usually laugh of it. She used to call me chicken batty. Just like people in Bath, and I'm glad Carlton is here. People in Bath, when I was growing up, I lived there until I was 11, would call me coconut juice. Because they used to send me everything. So now, my grandmother, those who have always believed that I serve a greater purpose than just walking, breathing, shitting, and eating, they would have been disappointed if me, that girl who was always told that she does not fit in that box, would keep silent just to be politically correct. I do not go out and sort out these roles. In fact, I live a very quiet life. But sometimes, when the roles knock on you, you have to embrace it. And again, if you're one of my co-workers, feel free to tape it. Because when someone tries to take away your dignity, you have 2 choices. You can either live by their rules and live in unhappiness, or you can set yourself free. And it might be struggling. But I have come to say to myself, if they're not trying to understand me, if you can I don't go around comparing white people to lizard. I don't. I could, but I don't. I don't go around telling them that my black skin offers me more protection than your pale skin. I don't do that. But maybe I should. Because maybe when I do that, it will put things into perspective for a lot of them. I can, but I don't. Because I try to play by societal rules. But how much are you supposed to let a person hurt you? How much am I supposed to let a person destroy the cornerstones of life that my grandmother instilled in me. How much am I supposed to accept? Because I grew up hearing that silence means consent. So if you are likening my blackness to cats and dogs and letting me know that it makes you sick, if I keep silent, it means I am agreeing with you. You see, sometimes my job offers me the security, knowing that every month there is a paycheck. My business don't offer me that security. Not yet. But sometimes you have to put yourself in a situation where you're either going to float or drown. Your dignity, my dignity, the little girl that my grandmother raised, the little girl that Mrs. Roberts and Mrs. Brown, not Montego Bay High School Brown, but Bath Primary School Brown, or Mrs. Jackson from basic school, that little girl that they saw so much potential in already as a 3-year-old child, I cannot allow those of them that have transitioned for their souls and their spirits to be in upheaval, because I accept that my blackness, my complexion, not something I said, not something I did, not the way I do my work, that I accept that my complexion is making people sick. I would have been doing a disservice. I would have been, for everyone who have believed in me, for everyone who still calls me Shan Shan or Dryad Gal. Those are the people who have known me since I was a small child attending Miss Jackson Basic School, Bath Basic School. If someone ever referred to me on my profile as Shanna without the W, or Shan Shan, or Dryad Gal, those are people who have known me from the day I was born. Those are people who didn't have to, but invested a lot of energy in reinforcing in me that I was destined for something that I could not see. I would have disappointed the likes of Mrs. McCarthy at Knox, where I went to sixth form. But mostly, I would have disappointed myself because I've never set out for anything that I've never achieved. If I set out for it, I got it. I might not stick with it, but I got it. I am not someone who bows under pressure. I am also not someone who can be intimidated, bought, or sold. I have never played by other people's rules for the sake of peace. I see it now in my children, but my grandmother used to tell me, I have a cantankerous spirit. Carlton, you remember the day when you run your mother with the frog? Carlton, and this was my neighbor in Bottom Yard. Actually, it was his mother who gave me the recipe for the lemongrass soap. My grandmother, my grandma used to tell me, Shanafi, you're too cantankerous. Even though I never really speak. I never really speak. But she said, your spirit. No, she never said me. She said, your spirit cantankerous, Shanafi. And I've never failed. I've never disappointed myself. And I've never taken on a battle that I've not won. And I haven't had an easy life. I haven't had an easy road. And that is why I am so appreciative, and I'm very thankful to Sweden. Sweden has given me opportunities that as a black woman in Jamaica with a wrong shade of blackness, I would only be able to dream of. Sweden have given me that. And I am forever grateful. The city that I live in, took me under their wings and helped me to foster my business. And I have no problem in my city. I don't work in my city. Maybe I should. No, I will never ever be employed again. I have made that decision. Because you cannot, hey Kiki, I am not a person who cries, but for the last 3 weeks, I go to my bed every night and I cried. Because all my life, I have never thought that I would live in a Sweden where people would tell me that my complexion is making them sick. I have never thought that. And I love Sweden. I was always like everybody else here until these racial attacks started coming at me. And then I have to choose. I live in a country where I have no relatives. So I have to choose. Is my sanity more important than job security? And yeah, my sanity is. Because a lot of people depend on me being sane. My kids, my customers. A lot of people depend on me being sane. So, and I say the same for those of us who are, and maybe that's why I haven't jumped on this African versus Chinese in an abusive way. I am being very pragmatic at it, and I'm being very matter of fact, because the same way I feel when a Swedish person tells me that my blackness is making them sick, it must be the same way the Chinese feels. But I also have to imagine, how do the Africans feel? And so that is why certain games I don't play. I have more white friends than I have black friends, and that is normal. Sweden have 10 million people and under 200,000 blacks. And I've never seen someone because of their complexion. I know people see me because of mine, but I've never seen it. You're who you are. And then whether you're black, white, I see you if you bleach, because you can't ignore that. But I have never judged someone based on the color of their skin. I've never done. The only time I've done that is when I decided that I was going to raise my family in a all-black household. That was the only time I consciously made that decision. And that was to go against the stereotype that I was successful because I had a white man. Because then it wasn't my success. And the sad thing is, it wasn't only white people who said that. It was also blacks. When I say to people, oh, you know, you have that skill, you can do this, I say, oh, you can do it because you're with a white man. So I'm going to stop because it's becoming painful. But be good. And the next time we make a racial or a xenophobic joke, or even a fat joke, anything, just think about the consequences of it. And for my Caucasian friends, it is not forgivable. It is unforgivable to compare a human being to cats and dogs. It doesn't work like that. And to my co-workers, I saw when one of you log in, feel free to save it. Feel free to again go and rat about it, because I have nothing to lose. When you try to take my dignity, you have taken it all. I didn't give it to you. You think you have it. But you can't hurt a person that is already hurting. And you can't take away from someone who have absolutely nothing to lose. And if anything, this have motivated me. I always hear my Africans write about this discrimination in Sweden. But I've never in my wildest dream believed that I would fall victim to it after doing everything right. But remember, for those of you who see black people as being inferior, remember something. If you tell us often enough that we're wild animals and we're that angry black woman or that aggressive black man, guess what? We will become it. We will satisfy your judgment of us. And not all cats can be domesticated. Your pedigree cat you can have on your bed. But if you continuously tell us, when you racially abuse us, when you put us in situation to lose our cool, we can be like tigers. We can be like lions. We can also attack. Because as a person who studied peace, and my Swedish classmate confirmed it, my professor once told me, here in Sweden and in Växjö at Linnéa University, my professor once told me that sometimes in order to achieve peace, war is necessary. And when you are telling me that my blackness is making you sick, you are asking me, you are declaring war. because that is not something I accept. That is not something I would accept. That is not me. That is not the child my grandmother raised. This is someone who have been through a lot, and it didn't break me. And for a while, your judgment of my complexion, because it was so foreign to me, it was so shocking to me that in 2020 Sweden someone could utter such words. I'm afraid of cats and dogs, black cats and dogs, and Nafi is black, so she's triggering the illness. In 2020 Sweden. I give more to this country than I've taken away from it. I have never gotten anything from this country that the general public doesn't get. Meaning, when I have my children, I am paid 80 to 90% of my salary to stay home with them. And I'm not even paid all my salary. It has a cap on it. When I am sick, I am paid 80% of my salary from day 2. When my children are sick, they pay 80% of my salary for me to stay home with my children. I have never gotten anything else from Sweden. Last year, 2019, in the middle of a nasty divorce, when I was almost made homeless in a home I bought cash with my own money, I just walked away and I left it. And I came here to the farm. I left it. Ja, someone said this, du vet, Cecilia, jag jobbar på såna med barn då. Och det var en förälder som sa det, att deras barn är rädd för svarta katt och hund, och det är bara jag som är mörk på mitt arbetsplats, så jag gör att deras barn får epilepsi. Och det är lite mer, men jag kan inte säga så mycket på den här. Ja. I have noticed something in Sweden, you know, that they speak a lot about cultural inclusion and racial inclusion in the workplace. And a Jamaican here, the same girl with an MBA, that the only job she can get is cleaning. An MBA from a Swedish university. She once said something to me, that if she ever go to a workplace and they had and it was only Swedes working there, she would never choose to be employed there. Because Sweden likes to say they do a lot. And first of all, for my co-workers who are watching and will save this and bring back to work, I calculated that I wasn't going back to the job when I made this video, when I chose to make this video. I calculated that. Or I can choose to fight you guys all the way through the discriminatory ombudsman, which I probably would win. Sweden like to say Pinterest, yes, it is worldwide, but when somebody comes into your professional space and tells you that, I can't keep silent about it. I don't know why I went back to that work anyhow, because I was supposed to. But I am also not used to it. So maybe that is why I'm reacting the way I'm reacting, because I never thought that in Sweden, me, or anybody for that matter, but especially myself, who don't live my life in black and white, would be a victim of this. So I understand you, but I also would be doing myself a disservice if I kept quiet because they want me to keep quiet, because I am being disloyal to my employer. As they like to say in Sweden when they want to keep you quiet. They say, oh, you're being disloyal. Oh, do you think somebody else will employ you? Well, I don't plan to be employed by somebody else. Yeah. So, it is, as he says, it is a worldwide problem, but it is a worldwide problem because we have allowed it to be, because we haven't united against it, because we believe what they say when they tell you that if you leave this job, and that was not told to me, if you leave this job, then we will not give you a reference for your next job. And we believe that, and because we believe that, we keep silent. Most Black people will tell you that they are far more qualified than their Swedish colleagues. But they're the last to be promoted. This society, like to tell you, that has not been my experience, but a lot of Black people will tell you that. This society will talk about inclusion and multiculturalism and multi everything. But when you go to the level of the decision makers, they're all Scandinavians. When you go to the head of the institutions, the people who actually can make an impact, no matter how qualified, hey Tatiana, no matter how qualified you are and the darker your skin, it is the higher. Oh wow, Claudia, where are you? It is the harder, the darker you are, it is the harder. And they silence us. And you know, the other day I saw a girl that grew up here in Sweden from the Ivory Coast. And this is another thing they do. She wrote that she was writing from the mental hospital in Norway. She's Swedish, but she lives in Norway. She's married to a Norwegian. And she writes last Friday that she is writing from the mental hospital in Norway. And you know what happened? Remember now, this is somebody who grew up in Sweden. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. Oh, I can imagine. I've heard stories from Switzerland, and I used to live in Germany, and I was told point blank when I lived in Munich that I was too Black. Oh my God, Cece. Wow, you know, that is also racism. But the thing is, you know, Sweden makes preparation for you to speak. Sweden fines you heavily for race, for discrimination. Sweden does that. Preparations are made and in place, and there are channels for you if you are being discriminated. But you see, the thing is, they have a lot of Africans or Black people, immigrants. The darker you are, it is the harder it is for you to have a permanent job. So they have you on 0-hour contracts. So when they mess with you, you fear. You should report her. They fear, they put you on temporary jobs, temporary. So you do not have the security of, even though it should not be that way. Hey, Tatiana. They put you on 0-hour contracts or on temporary staffing. So when you speak out about the discrimination or whatever, it doesn't have to be racial. When you speak out about anything that is affecting you, just like my little, vilket land är du från igen? I don't remember. Just like my friend up there in Stockholm just wrote that her boss told her yesterday that they're worried about coming to work because she lives where those people with corona is. Meaning she's going to take corona to work. The Swedish experts already tell you that almost everybody in Sweden is going to get corona. You see, it is that kind of thing you face. It is that kind of thing. And because they have you on 0-hour contracts, now I have a permanent job, but because they have you on 0-hour contracts, you are afraid to speak out, because if you speak out, what they do, they delay and delay and delay the investigative process. So when your contract goes out in the next 6 months, they just do not rehire you. Then you have to explain for the next employer why they did not hire you. And of course, if you constantly, the only people who constantly move from work to work to work unwillingly are Africans, dark-skinned people, sometimes South Americans. Because they do that to you. They put you in a state of insecurity. What? Really, Cece? Wow. So my friend here up in Stockholm is saying that because her employer says she lives in an area that has, and I know you live in an area with a lot of black people, Cece, and a lot of Middle Eastern people, I know that. But they're saying because she lives in an area with a lot of people who have fell victim to corona, she is healthy, but they wanted her to go on sick leave. You see, the thing is, I don't wish what I felt on my, and that is in you see, Swedes, they're very smart. They attacked you racially. Without you knowing that, because now you're going to tell somebody that because you live in an area that is dominated by East Africans and North Africans and Muslims and people in Stockholm that are have a high percentage that have fell victim to corona, then you should go on sick leave. You know, as I said, I've spent the last 3 weeks crying because it hurts me. It hurts me to believe that this country that I have called home for the last 20 years, one of its citizens who is supposed to be a role model in society would tell me that my skin make them sick. And that is how they go about it. They don't come out and tell you like they did to my son like 2 years ago when they said to my son, oh, you're like a monkey. They don't come out and tell you that. They do like they do to my friend Cece here, that tells you, oh, you live in that area where a lot of people have corona, so it's best for you to go on sick leave. That is against everything that is being advised. If you're not sick, go to work. Or like they don't tell me, or like they did to me, oh, this person is afraid of black cats and dogs, and Shanafi, you're the only black person there, so you're making the person sick. It is hard because I truly love this country. I've gotten a lot from this country. But I think when it comes to integration and multiculturalism, Sweden is going backward rather than forward. Sometimes I wonder if I live in the southern United States or I live in East London or South London. Sometimes I wonder, is this the Sweden that I so love and defended for 20 years? I have another person in Jönköping to you people who speak English, who she had coughed at her work. Her Swedish colleagues were coughing in the lunchroom, and nobody noticed anything. They just said, oh, it's like allergy season. And then this African girl coughed, and they told her, oh, you need to go home now because you have symptoms. Is it different when a Swedish person cough than when a black person cough? Is it really that different? You see, so you have lived in Sweden since you are a year old for 36 years, and you are facing this. You, someone who speaks Swedish just like every Swede, who went and got your education in Sweden. The only difference probably with you and a Swedish person is a native Swede, is, or a Scandinavian or a Viking or whatever they're called, is the complexion. And you are facing this. You who do not have the language barrier is facing this. So think about those people who are coming newly to Sweden. Just think about that. Just think about that. When I lived in Stockholm or Houdini, I read that Sweden was the place where you had the most doctors driving taxis. Because it's like, as I was saying previously, it's like people get disappointed, not where I live. Please, if you're having problems, come and live where I live. You won't have problems where I live. I can tell you that much. And I live in a very, very small city or parish or whatever it is. I don't have problem where I live. I have problem where I work, but not where I live. Sweden, they say, is the place where you have the most qualified people doing unqualified jobs. Because so much emphasis is placed on your ability to speak, prata svenska obehindrat, to speak Swedish without any dialect or accent or what you call it, grammatic errors. When throughout the world, we know that your ability to learn and speak a language is not a prerequisite or a foundation from where you can base how smart a person is. It is not. And Sweden is also the country outside of the United Kingdom where you have people speaking the best Swedish, the best English. So I don't understand. The new thing they have started to do to discriminate against immigrants, and it has become institutionalized now, is requiring that you have a driver's license. The Swedish driving test is one of the hardest tests to pass. That is why outside of Sweden, when you have a Swedish driver's license, if you're in the other European countries, you pay less for insurance. At least in Spain, I know that. But in order to not have immigrants apply for jobs that they're qualified for, and because the lack of driving license is more predominant among the immigrant society community in Sweden, you are not applying for a job to drive. You're applying for a job as a nurse, as a butcher, as a janitor, whatever it is. And they're requiring that you have a Swedish B license, meaning a Swedish manual driving license. The automatic license is not good enough because most immigrants they come here with a license from their country, so they just go and drive. So no. They require that you have a Swedish B license plus 2 years driving experience, because that is the last thing they can do to keep immigrants outside of applying for jobs. Now, if part of my job requirement is not driving, why do I need to have a driver's license when I'm not being hired as a driver? If I am being hired to teach, how is it your problem how I get to work? How is it your problem if I can drive, if I am not being hired to drive? I will give a story. When I was in Jamaica in 2018 and preparing to come back to Sweden, I realized that I needed to have a job when I came back because I've spent the last year and a half living on my savings. So I live in a small village, 40 minutes from a place called Kalmar. I applied for a job at the social Vervaltning, it's like the social services. I am what you call a dual diagnosis treatment, whatever it is, yeah? Work with people of mental health and addiction. So I applied for the job from Jamaica, thinking that, okay, I knew that I had to come back to Sweden now, so I need time on me to apply for the job. It was to work in what they call in Sweden as social psychiatry, yeah? So I applied for the job in Kalmar, and I live in a place called Ruda, which is 40 minutes away from Kalmar. The job is like most other jobs when you're working with people. It's like weekends all over the place. But I love it. I love this kind of thing. I like interacting. The enhetschef, the manager, said, oh, your CV looks good. I still have her email because I printed it. Oh, your CV looks really good, but you live in Ruda. Meaning that my CV looks very good, but I live in the place where I lived, which was 40 minutes away. So I said, me being who I am, I already decided that I wasn't going to be working there. So I said, is it that I live in Ruda, or is it that I have the wrong first name? Because what does it matter how I get to work? If I cannot come to work in time, then you should have a problem with me. And then we had this conversation back and front, back and front, back and front, until I decided that it wasn't for me. I had the same experience where I live. Like 2016, I applied for a job for a home where they had refugee children. And part of the application says that, oh, you're supposed to have a driver's license. Everybody know I don't drive and probably never will. And before I sent the application, I sent out the message, and I was like, I sent out a mail. Does the job entail, does the job description entail driving? They said no. So I said, why is it a requirement to have a driver's license? Now, this was before I had the company here. So it was before people knew who I was here. And I never heard from the person again in the same city I live. And I said nothing. But I realized that now, because they cannot, first, before they used to discriminate. When I lived in Stockholm, I lived in a very good area, so no problem. I didn't have problem. I lived in an area where they were in the suburbs, in a house. Jag bodde i Chesta, Sisi, precis på den villaområdet bakom Huddinge sjukhus. So, and because my name, most people would use my middle name. So until I start to insist that they use my first name. So combined with my ex-husband's surname, I have a very Swedish name. And then I did go to school here in Sweden. So then I have a Swedish education. So it is not much they could discriminate against until they see me in person. So the new thing in Sweden, the thing back then, was to look where people's address were. Jag bodde där i Chester då. So the thing is to look back on the addresses people have. And then if you lived somewhere where was predominantly, because of segregation and no fault of your own, something that was predominantly by West Africans or by East Africans or by Middle Eastern people, then you would never, ever, ever get the job. But now they realize that normal Swedish people are living in these areas too, because housing is hard to find. People that have spent all their lives, they might be immigrants or second generation immigrants, are living in these areas too, and they're getting an education. It's not like the immigrants in Sweden are not getting an education. They're getting an education. And oftentimes, because we know that we have to be twice as qualified as our Swedish colleagues, or twice as experienced at what we're doing as our Swedish colleagues, we push harder. We push really, really hard. And then if you're coming from the Caribbean and you come here at age 20, if you come here with your partner, chances are you already did university in the Caribbean. Yeah? So they realize that the only thing they can use against us now is requiring that you have a driver's license that is a manual driver's license, not automatic, and that you have been driving for 2 years, meaning that the probation period is over. Now, how do you get around that? Isn't that some form of institutionalized? See, I think you should take that up with the union. I think you should take that up with the union. Oh my God. Warholman is one of the most racially diverse people. Doesn't she realize that people who live in Voorburg, which is a Rådhus area, have to pass Skärholmen? Voorburg is dominated by Swedes. The people who live in Kungenskurva, in those newly built villas, or those villas that were built in 2010 and 2012, don't they have to pass Skärholmen? Don't they take the same red train like everybody else going into Stockholm? Don't they? Yeah, that is what they say, because the Swedish driving test is so hard to pass. So that it's exactly what they say, Daisha. If you don't have a driver's license, then you're pretty much stupid. I don't have a Swedish driver's license, and you'd be very stupid to call me stupid, if I might say so myself. Well, I have other driver's license, but not a Swedish one. So I don't know. It's like it is getting worse. My thing is, if I am not applying for a job as a okari, or I'm not applying for a job in home care, where if you live as rural as I live, then you have to drive between the houses because they are not close to each other. Why is it, what other grounds other than institutionalized racism? Why I am being told, not me, but why people are being told that they need to have a driver's license? Why? And that is why when I look at the situation where they're saying this is something that belongs in the third world. I remember when I lived in Montego Bay and people wanted, those who cannot afford private preparatory school for their kids, and they wanted their children to either go to Cornell Avenue or they wanted their children to go to Barracks Road Primary, then they would find some relatives. They would find some relatives that lives in Montego Bay City, and they would use that address just in order to get their kids into school inside Montego Bay. And that is what they want, and that is why you have people in Sweden. You have people in Sweden that actually sell their address. When I was living in Stockholm, I didn't sell my address, but I had like 3 people registered on my address. They didn't live there, but they registered on it so that they could apply for jobs in Stockholm and have a better chance to get it. It is discrimination. You know, I've done the Swedish driver's theory test and I passed the theory test. I just didn't go into the driving. The theory is not my problem. I think that the theory is not my problem. I just don't like being judged by other people. That's my disability. The theory, I know that it's down to my own ability. No, make a leave. But I can say this to my fellow immigrants, whether like myself, you hold a Swedish passport, or for those of you who are just coming, don't you ever let anyone let you feel as if you're inferior to them. And when your employers, whether you work, know the rules, know the laws. Know the rules and know the laws. Because if you know your rights, you will know that they can't tell you that you're not able to speak about discrimination. Join the union, because at the end of the day, when the fight is bigger than you can fight for yourself, Olga, can you stop doing that, please? When the fight is bigger than you can fight for yourself, the union is there to fight it for you. Make that sacrifice of whatever it is, 130 or 230 kroners each month, and pay the union. Don't you ever let your employers typecast you as that angry black woman. Oh God, I'm going to block you. Can you stop doing that? Don't you let your employers or your employees or your co-workers typecast you as that aggressive black man or that angry black woman. Don't you let somebody step on your toes and then you pee your underwear trying to bear the pain internally than to scream. Don't let them tell you. Don't let them tell you that you are not allowed to speak about the injustice. You are not allowed to break secrecy clauses. But you are allowed to speak and criticize your employer. Well, if you're employed privately, you have less chance. But if you are employed by the commune or by the government directly, you have all right to publicly criticize them. You cannot identify people, but you have a right to criticize them. And you don't. Sweden prides itself, or Sweden gives itself this international image that everyone is equal and they are no longer a homogeneous society. Take them to bear on that. And if they preach multiculturalism and all-inclusiveness, challenge them on that. Because you cannot employ one single foreigner, one black person, and then tell them that, oh, I have a black employee. Don't be that black employee who is the face of their company. I understand we're in the minority here. And I understand that we're well and truly a minority with taking up less than 2% of the population. But we eat pepper. And we spice our food. And we overcook our food. It means we have energy. If you can eat pepper and habanero, you can challenge these people. It's just that there is a right way to do things and a wrong way. And don't let them tell you that if they racially discriminate against you and you speak about it or you challenge it, you are deeming yourself unemployable. I can't see how to block him. That's my problem. Okay, I figured out how to block him, so he's blocked now. Because that is what they do. The only people who can be controlled are the people that you instill fear in. Whether you are black coming directly from Africa, or you are black as the descendants of African slaves. I blocked him, Cece. Or you are the descendants of African slaves, you know how to fight. And I don't mean with sticks and stones. By the fact that you have had to work harder, you know how to challenge them. By the fact that you got a foot in on their playing ground, their playing field, it means that you have already outsmarted them. Do not accept another person's definition of who you are. Don't let them tell you that it is okay to clean up the tables after they have eaten, but it is not okay to sit and enjoy the same meal with them. Don't let them tell you that. And I used to be against people sitting at home and being on benefits, and I am still against it. But if they choose to create an hostile work environment for you, they can't prove how crazy you are. Tanya yada make them pay for. Because they like, and it's not even in your work. It's even when you marry these people, they do the same thing to you. I saw one of my friends that I know personally because she's a customer of mine. I saw she put up last Thursday that she was in the mental hospital in Norway. And it was her husband who put her in the mental hospital because he was trying to take advantage of her. And when she retaliated, as I said, we eat pepper. We eat our food with spices. So we have more life in us. We don't sit and... No. When you're eating pepper, so we're passionate about things that affects us. Yeah. So her husband got them to put her in the mental institution last week. Because as a black woman who is expressing herself about the way he is dealing with her, she was too aggressive. And if she's too aggressive in speaking in the way she knows how, as an African woman, then she must be crazy. She must be crazy. They only had her there for a day because they found nothing wrong with her. But this is how these people work. It's the same that happened to me. I bought a house and that I bought by myself. And when I chose that I didn't want to be in a relationship anymore, the house is empty up the street from me. Because that is how these people are. As long as you decide that you're going to live on your own terms, then you become the enemy. But any people, hey Yasmin, gratis till bebisen, Skylar. Hoppas att ni mår bra. Yeah, so you people have a good day. This wasn't even what I came here to talk about, but you see, sometimes you plan something and then the purpose is greater than you really planned. So thank you guys and have a good one.